Hi, this is Niyanta Spelman with Rainforest Partnership, bringing to you Our Planet, Our Future, a video podcast presented by Rainforest Partnership. Find us at www.rainforestpartnership.org and on social media. Join us as we bring interesting and compelling guests to talk about the environment, climate change, and rainforests. With me here today is Giacomo Grassi at COP23 on Forest Day, and he was just on a panel this morning with a very distinguished panel, very compelling and stirring comments, and we'll talk a little bit more about your thoughts on forests, why they're important in terms of the IPCC report, in terms of what's the conversations that are happening here as well for Forest Day.
Well, first of all, global key in the global carbon budget. If you see the global carbon budget, 10% of anthropogenic emissions come from deforestation. And if you then see where the anthropogenic emissions go, nearly half remains in the atmosphere and a third is absorbed by forest. Already forest is mitigating climate change substantially. So forests are both sides of the equations, are both part of the problem through deforestation and part of the solution through the significant amount of carbon which is absorbed by forests and is already now slowing the global warming. Of course, the forest sources and sinks are allocated not evenly across the globe. In the temperate and boreal zones, the forest sink prevails, which means absorption of CO2 from the atmosphere. In the tropics, emission from deforestation prevails, and there are still a lot of uncertainty in estimates, both on emissions and also from the sink in tropical forestry growth. And which are the forest mitigation options, the main options to mitigate climate change through forestry? Well, the two main options is reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, and also conserve and enhance the carbon stock and the carbon sinks through afforestation, forest management, forest restoration, and also in wood products. And here, some years ago, the IPCC clarified that the situation is a bit more complex in the sense that one should not only look at the forest carbon in a strict way, but look more holistically, more comprehensively.
Right.
And the idea is to minimize the net emissions from the forest and land sector, including interaction with other land uses, because if we expand forest area, there could be a competition with agriculture and food production. And on the other side, we have to take into account the substitution effects, which involves, for example, when we substitute energy, we burn wood to produce energy instead of fossil fuel. Or when we build wooden houses instead of concrete ones, we replace energy from cement production.
So this idea of looking at everything holistically, because there's cause and effects, or they're not singular choices.
Yes, exactly. There are various options, and there are trade-offs between options. Right. Because if you have one piece of wood, you may decide to burn it and make energy, or you may decide to build a house. And at the end of life, you burn the wood. Yes. Which in most cases could be better options. But it really depends case by case. Of course, you may use only the residues from harvesting to burn it immediately for bioenergy. But essentially, there has been already also recently a German study that highlighted the importance of these substitution effects, which in some cases might even be greater than the forest sink itself. So the material substitution is often neglected by forest policy, so the use of long-lived wood products to substitute other, for example, concrete and steel.
Right.
And bioenergy is also important. It's very controversial, bioenergy. The main reason of the controversy is the question, is bioenergy carbon neutral or not?
Right.
And this is a very divisive question, and you can get different answers from different perspectives. But let's first clarify that IPCC never said that bioenergy is carbon neutral. IPCC just says that we should avoid double counting in reporting.
And that was an important clarification you were pointing out in the panel as well.
Yes.
Because it's controversial and sometimes people are looking at one part and not looking at the whole.
So the carbon neutrality could be an important question in some aspects, but it's something that it could also, this question could confound policymakers. I think the best thing is to recognize that you should avoid double reporting on emissions. Usually these emissions are reported at carbon stock change in the first sector, so should not be counted twice in the energy sector. In the energy sector, you count the greenhouse gas saving. But the key point is accounting. And the accounting is not in the hands of the science of PC, but it's in the hands of the countries.
Right.
Accounting means what is then, what really counts toward meeting a target, for example. And for the accounting, what science can say is that for bioenergy and other mitigation options to be credible, the atmospheric impact, good or bad, of all forest policies, including bioenergy, should be reflected in the country accounts. The risk is that complex country rules may somehow hide emissions due to increased harbor for bioenergy purpose. This would undermine the credibility of bioenergy as a mitigation options. Overall, among the wide range of possible mitigation options, the best strategy is to first of all, analyze, simulate various scenarios,
right.
Simulate the temporal dynamics of emissions for various options, simulate the trade-off, and then based on that, make a choice which the best choice is the one that maximizes the sum of all options, not only one. So the sink is important, but it's just one option. There is also reducing emissions, of course, and substitution effects.
And so, in conclusion, in a sense, what you're saying is that look at it holistically, don't double count, look at, balance everything. Yes. That's in play.
That's in play. And this, and what we can also add is that take into account all these mitigation options. The APC already clarified in the fifth assessment report that forestry has a large mitigation potential, depending on the cost analyzed. The potential is mainly from reduced emission from deforestation in the tropics and enhance the sink in through afforestation and forest management in the temperate and boreal zones. And this potential is increasingly acknowledged by countries. Till a few years ago, forest was, despite the high potential highlighted by science, was often seen as a neglected secondary mitigation options. I say it a bit like Cinderella.
I loved that. Yes. And everybody loved how you talked about forest being the Cinderella.
Yes. So till I would say till before Paris, forest was the Cinderella. Said, don't come at the mitigation ball. You're not important. You're complicated. So Paris Agreement was a game changer in this respect because put forest at the center of the stage, and country responded. And a recent paper we published show that the countries' expectation on the role of forest in achieving their pledges is very high, because it's 25% of their INDC pledges by 2030 is expected to come from forest. So
how realistic do you think that is?
Well,
it's incredible. It's an easy one to put into the.
Yes. 25% is quite a big number, but it's what the countries see themselves. Part of that is related to how the NDC are defined. Part of that, of course, in the case of Brazil, most of the reduction that they committed to do in the NDC is already done, because they reduced emissions from deforestation by 70% in the last 15 years. So part of that already occurred. But then you hear a recent paper like the one from Gracecom that we heard in the same panel, which go even beyond. They say the cost-effective mitigation potential is more than 25. He says 37.
Right.
So we have to be careful there, because on the one side, okay, now Cinderella seems that has joined the Paris ball, mitigation ball, which is good, but still has not married the prince. So we are in a phase in which we have a science that clearly indicates a great mitigation potential. Countries seems to take it seriously, but then we have to start delivering. Yes. And there are additional steps to do.
And that's the hard part, right?
It's the hard part.
It's nice to sort of calculate and say, here are our plans.
Exactly. Don't
You're
think that the job is done. The job has to be done. So, and from IPC side, what will be needed is to identify better the best mitigation options in terms of cost effectiveness, in terms of trade-off and synergies with adaptation and other ecosystem services, which are extremely important, with biodiversity. And there are a number of reports that will come in the coming years. There is the IPCC Special Report on 1.5 next year, the IPCC Special Report on climate change on land in 2 years, and then the 6th Assessment Report in 2022. And all these reports will provide key information on all these that we discussed.
Yes.
And will inform the global stocktake in 2023. And then on the other side, countries have to improve the estimates of greenhouse gas emission from forests and the monitoring of forests, because we need to increase confidence in estimates. If Cinderella was excluded from the board previously because there was not enough confidence in estimates. So we have to take this into account. So in summary, science leaves no doubt. The 2-degree target under Paris cannot be reached without a significant contribution of forest. We should be clear that this should not be an excuse for the other sector to reduce less. A drastic emissions of fossil fuel emissions is absolutely needed. The forest itself is essential, but will not fix the climate problem alone.
By itself, yes.
So the forest has the opportunity and the responsibility to deliver. The mitigation options are there. Now it's time to take action.
What is your hope for COP23?
Well, my hope is that forests are increasingly recognized, and the COP23 could indicate the first step into action. Some action is already occurring, but we are still in the phase of seeing, oh, look how much mitigation is there in the forest sector. But right. the most difficult, the most important thing, as you said, is then start to take action on the ground. And this would require a number of complex political framework, and here the COP could deliver, which means financial support and helping countries to build up an appropriate governance and appropriate policies.
And then also have the enforcement side as well, as we heard from.
Enforcement side, yes. There are enormous, of course, I've talked a little bit from a scientific point of view, but of course there are other aspects which are extremely challenging.
Yes.
And without which the mitigation potential will just remain a promise.
Because on paper it sounds lovely, when in action, when you go down in the ground and you're in the forest, and what you see is often there's a disconnect between what's happening here and then what's on the ground. But this is very exciting because you need this to make that a reality. So, yes. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome.